Welcome to the Year 5 English Homework Review video for Block 4, Week 3. This week you had 2 activities to complete online, which was the Comprehension Text 9 and Quick Practice Tests for Grammar. There was also 2 exercises to complete in your CGP English Spelling, Punctuation and Grammar book, which was Test 3, pages 8 to 11 and Test 7, pages 22 to 25.
First thing was test 3 on pages 8 to 11. Ideally, we'd like you to complete these tests in 10 minutes or as close to that as possible. But do make a note of how long it does take you so you know roughly where you're at if it takes you a little bit longer. So the first thing we had to do was find grammatical mistakes in this passage. Each numbered line has a mistake or no mistake, and you had to work out which one was. Tomorrow, Carl will audition for a place at Lawton University. So this is incorrect because it's meant to be future tense and auditioned is past tense. So we would lose the suffix ed and just leave it with audition for it to make sense. Tomorrow, Carl will audition for a place at Lawton University. This prestigious institution only admits 10 dancers per year, so he's determined to seize this opportunity. To make sure he's ready for the audition, he'd been rehearsing at least twice a day for weeks. That should be he's been rehearsing with an apostrophe as a contraction of he has. Or, of course, you could say he has. To make sure he's ready for the audition, he's been rehearsing or he has been rehearsing at least twice a day for weeks. After all, it could earn him an university place. Again, that doesn't make sense because of the 2 vowel sounds. So we would say a university place, not an university place. Number 5. Which of the sentences below uses the present progressive form? Present progressive is also known as present continuous, and that means the action is still happening. Leo is taking part in the creative writing competition. In simple present, it would be Leo takes part. Present progressive shows a continuous action. Leo is taking part in the creative writing competition. It can't be A or B because they're past tense progressive. The children were all sitting quietly in the school hall. And it's progressive or continuous because it's talking about the children were all sitting as opposed to the children sat quietly in the school hall. So it's progressive, but it's past. Karen was explaining the route to her friend Adrian. Simple past, Karen explained the route to her friend Adrian. Past progressive, Karen was explaining the route to her friend Adrian. So it's that continuous action. And D, Darcy wants to visit her sister who lives in London. That's something that she wants to do. She hasn't done it yet, so it's not present progressive. Number 6. Although it was lunchtime, Mr. Ashton decided to eat a bowl of cereal. Write down the subordinating conjunction from the sentence above, and that was although. A subordinating conjunction can be used to create a subordinate clause by adding an extra bit of information to our main clause. The main clause here being Mr. Ashton decided to eat a bowl of cereal. This makes sense on its own, but we are told that although it was lunchtime, Mr. Ashton decided to eat a bowl of cereal. So that just gives us a little bit more information on the context of the situation, using a subordinate clause to link those 2 together. And number 7, the part of the sentence that contains an adverbial is D, as often as possible. An adverbial phrase tells you where, when, or how something happened. So in this case, Naomi and Stephen, who both love sport, play badminton as often as possible. The adverbial is telling you when they play badminton. Now, number 8. If she had read the book, Tina would have understood the film's plot better. Would, as used here, is a modal verb. A modal verb indicates degrees of possibility. Whether something is definitely going to happen, it's likely to happen, it might happen, it won't happen. So that's the function of a modal verb. A preposition tells you where something is in proximity to something, in, on, over, under. An adverbial, we've just talked about, tells you where, when, or how things are happening in a place in time. And an adverb modifies a verb. Tina read the book quickly, for example. Now, number 9, this might be a bit trickier for you. This is something that you usually learn in year 6, active and passive voice. So please don't worry if you find it tricky at the moment. Saroon took the photograph of the sunset. Rewrite the sentence in the passive voice. Now, this is where the subject and the object of the sentence change. So the subject of the sentence has something done to it. The original sentence, Saroon is the active voice. She is taking the photograph of the sunset. But an example of passive voice, you might say, the photograph of the sunset was taken by Saroon. So Saroon is now no longer the active participant in the sentence because it's not saying that she took the photo, but the photo was taken by her. So the photograph of the sunset becomes the main part of the sentence here in the passive voice. It was taken by Saroon, whereas she was the active participant in the original way it was written. Saroon took the photograph of the sunset. If you want to look that up, I would have a look at BBC Bitesize and see they should have some resources on there if you want to do some extra revision on active and passive voice, because it's not something that you'll likely be taught very much in year 5, more likely year 6. So it's once you understand, it's not too tricky to get your head around, but at first it might seem a bit confusing. So I would try the BBC Bitesize website as a good starting point to do some research. Now, for each numbered line, we're choosing a word which completes the passage correctly. It needs to make sense and be written in correct English. What you can do here is read each option and see what sounds right. You can read it aloud or in your head, but if you're not too sure which word to choose, try it out, see how it sounds, and you will get a better understanding because of the way you're used to speaking and reading. You will know then which word makes sense in terms of subject and verb agreement. And of course, read ahead to make sure that you understand what the sentences are saying. So the number of Kiwis in New Zealand has plummeted. So plummeted means declined rapidly. And you're talking about the number of Kiwis. Something has happened. Consequently, conservationists have intensified their efforts to save them. Consequently might be one that you were stuck on here, and that means as a result of this. And that's the most appropriate word. Consequently, so as a result of this decline in numbers, conservationists have intensified their efforts to save them. Eventually, they hope to remove Kiwis from the list of endangered species. Now, number 14, we're looking at determiners. I think we've talked about these before. So determiners introduce a noun. They are also sometimes called articles, and they tend to be little words like and the, as well as the examples you see here. So remember, they introduce a noun. How is not a determiner because it would tell you how something was being done rather than introducing a noun. How wouldn't tend to come before a noun. Lila got up very early. You can rewrite this sentence adding a subordinate clause to it. So your answers will vary here. Maybe even though she was tired, Lila got up very early. Remember that the subordinate clause does not make sense on its own, but adds a little bit of extra information. Subordinate clauses can be used at the start, end, or even the middle of a sentence, in which case they're known as embedded clauses. So we have the example here at the beginning. Even though she was tired, Lila got up very early. We could say, Lila got up very early, even though she was tired. Or we might say, despite being tired, Lila got up very early. If we use the subordinate clause at the beginning of a sentence, it must be followed by a comma. If we want to put it in the middle of a sentence, we could. I'm just going to finish this one here. So despite being tired, Lila got up very early. We could say something like this. Lila, who was very tired, just say tired. Lila, who was tired, got up very early. So can you see here, we have split the main clause, Lila got up very early, and we've put the subordinate clause in the middle as an embedded clause. Okay, so it can go at the end, it can go at the beginning, it can go in the middle. And if it's in the middle, think about a comma sandwich. You need to surround the clause by commas or other ways to indicate parenthesis, like dashes or brackets. But we'll be here forever if we go into that in too much detail. One thing to be aware of is that you cannot use a coordinating conjunction here. Coordinating conjunction links two main clauses, both of which could make sense on their own. And these can be remembered by the acronym FANBOYS. And they are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. So any of those would not work in the answer to this question because they are coordinating conjunctions, not subordinating. So they wouldn't make a subordinate clause. Okay, 16. Saeed is afraid of heights, so he refused to go on the roller coaster. Afraid is an adjective here because it's describing how Saeed felt. And 17, add words before and after the noun birds to make your own noun phrase. So a noun phrase is where you use two or more adjectives to describe a noun. You put them before and after, it might look something like the example here, which is little birds with purple beaks. So in this case, you're being asked to add describing words before and after the noun. You might say large birds with big wings. That was a rubbish example. That I could definitely better words. So thinking about different kind of adjectives that you could use to describe any kind of bird. And number 18, the postman delivered the parcel you were expecting. This is a noun phrase because it's describing the parcel to the person. They were expecting it. Okay, moving on to test 7. Again, 10 minutes. Reasonable is not an adverb. If it was reasonably, then it would be. Adverbs often finish in ly, but not all the time. So remember, an adverb modifies a verb. So Tina was already late, but her car wouldn't start. Sally was rarely on time. And maybe can also be used as an adverb. Maybe if we finish our work on time, we can go to the park. But reasonable is an adjective. Number 2, Priya popped her balloon, which was purple, because she really wanted a blue one. And which is a relative pronoun, making a relative clause. It's a strange highlight. Which was purple. This is a relative clause. It's also a subordinate clause, making a complex sentence. Just like we talked about before, this is embedded in the middle of a sentence. So it can also be called an embedded clause. The reason it's called a relative clause is because it uses the relative pronoun which. Other examples could be who, when, where, and so forth. So it might sound really confusing talking about subordinate clauses, embedded clauses, relative clauses, but actually they're all kind of the same thing. So it just depends whether if you're using relative pronouns, it can be called a relative clause, but it's really just a subordinate clause using a subordinating conjunction to link ideas. It's just you being able to recognize which is which when you're asked. But when you're doing your own independent writing, you are probably using a lot of these things without even realizing the technical terminology for them. Here we have another passive voice sentence. The fish in the pond were fed every day by Josh and his granddad. This would be active voice if we said Josh and his granddad fed the fish in the pond, because they would be doing the action. Instead, they are having the action done to them. The fish in the pond were fed every day by Josh and his granddad. A, B, and C are all written in the active voice. So Katie was eating her sandwich. Olufemi's dog was barking at the neighbour's cats. Tom drew a funny picture. But A, you could say the sandwich was eaten by Katie to make it passive voice. The cats were being barked at by Olufemi's dog. The picture was drawn by Tom because he was bored. So you're just switching things around to make it passive as opposed to active. Now, for each numbered line, choose the word which completes the passage correctly, which must make sense. So again, just like we did before, I would read this to yourself with different options to see which one sounds correct, and read beyond the gap to see what the sentence is trying to say. Bartok sat on the edge of the pitch and watched the game. One day, if I work hard, he said, I'll be able to play for the team. He thought about the posters of players on his bedroom wall and wondered who they admired. He smiled as he imagined joining the team on the pitch to help them score the winning goal. And this is quite self-explanatory, really. So we've got sat, we've got smiled. These are past tense verbs, as is wondered. Posters of players, they're going to be on his wall, not in his wall or through his wall. And he imagined joining the team on the pitch to help them. So them being plural because of the number of players on the team. Number 10, the determiner here is 24 because cupcakes is the noun and we're being told that there are 24 of them. Janice decorated 24 cupcakes that she had baked earlier. And now here for 11, we have another example of a passive voice sentence. The pastries from the bakery were devoured by Gary. If you were going to rewrite this sentence in the active, you would use the words that you're already given and possibly remove some. So you might say, Gary devoured the pastries from the bakery. And that would mean Gary was then doing the action. So that's the active voice format. So remember, active and passive. Active is where the subject of the sentence is doing the action, and the passive, it's having the action done to them. Number 12, which of the options contains a possessive pronoun? That slice of cake is mine, Sarah insisted, so please don't eat it. Okay, so pronouns refer to people like I, he, she. Possessive pronoun shows that things belong to somebody. So that slice of cake is mine, Sarah insisted. And number 13, Tyler rode the old bike with the rusty chain as slowly as he could. And that's the adverbial phrase in that sentence. Shows the reader information about how Tyler cycled. So not just slowly, that's the key thing to think about. It was as slowly as he possibly could. Now we have a passage containing some grammatical mistakes, with each numbered line having one mistake or maybe no mistake. And for each line, you're going to work out which group of words contains one and circle the correct letter. Attention, Major Tan bellowed. All the troops in the crumbling barracks leapt to his feet and saluted smartly. This is a mistake because it should be their feet. We're talking about plural number of troops. All the troops in the crumbling barracks leapt to their feet and saluted smartly. The major began prowling the ranks, probing. So a mistake to penalise. That should be for a mistake to penalise. He could not find one. Every soldier was very well presented, and the mayor knew that they must have spent hours the night before preparing for his inspection. Good work, Major. I keep saying mayor. Good work, he grumbled, making his way out. This should be, for 17, must have, as a contraction of must have. This is something that I see very, very often. Another one is should have, should be should have. So it's not of. Don't do this, please. This is a pet hate of mine. It's a contraction of must have becoming must have.